which I find again those icons of modern and come to think about them now more deeply and more concentrated by it. And the Stedelijk has a collection which is engaging. And I think that is what we should do in the future also. We should be able to, we should try and find engagement in a collection like this. And this is what we have to talk about. And also in these times in which we can't visit the museum as such, it's so important that we keep up the engagement and that we keep up the let's say, the solidarity with one another in the art world, in the museum world, but also in the real world. Well, we're not as museum staff working, but we do some technical adjustments every now and then. Also, where you see it right here, this elevator cover, this will also probably be the color again. Probably the 1st of June, we'll keep world, and that we think also about, every now and then, that we think about, go up with you on the escalators. It can be difficult with the connection on that because of the materials here, but we go up again, we don't fall down. We leave now the museum sector, so to say, the arts sector. We have a rite de passage, as I always call it, and we go into another world, and we get all the way up, and we end in one of the later pieces of the collection. We end up with the, which is very confronting, which is very textual, but which is also very, very contemporary. And the Stedelijk is all about modern art, as I just showed you, but the Stedelijk is also a lot about contemporary. And the Stedelijk wants to be a museum which is focusing on the contemporary. Into your face installation, I want to say, we want to present you with a world. We want to present you with a world you can dive into. Hello, all of you. I don't know where you are. I hope you are at home. Most of you, tell us where you are. Ask us questions during this guided tour. We're here at I want to say to you at the end of this tour, I want to say, touch with the arts, stay in touch with immaterial questions, stay in touch with the arts, stay in touch with the museums, and stay at home. It's for the sake of all of us, and we'll be back with you, and we go through this together. See you soon. We want you to let us know what you think about it. You want you to leave your comments with us. We are doing something with those comments. We have time to reflect. We have time to discuss. We have time to rethink the future of the Stedelijk. And together with you, together with your comments, I have a very good feeling that we open. We're still closed until. So we dive into base. The first thing we see is nothing hanging here. The Chagall was hanging here, fire doors here, and it was too dangerous to keep it up again. It will be placed again soon. It's not far away from here, but these are things we can try and do now, every now and then. This is how things were going. I go back 2 steps probably, and Sven is following of a museum in a lockdown situation. Of course, when we are not here, we try and have the light level almost 0 here. But since we are still doing some work every now and then, or we're doing those tours, we cover the light the works which has some which would get problems of getting exposed too much to the light. So we have 5 Van Goghs in the collection in total. This is the start of the base here, and I just typical Van Gogh, and it's always nice to see how these colors come to you. Try and hide as much as possible. And when we open up, because it's an Easter egg hunt, and we're looking for the hidden things, and things are and works on paper, but also this kind of work, these kind of parts from our design collection, applied art. People also always forget about this platform when you are here visiting the Stedelijk as a real person. But the platform is specifically interesting right now because, of course, you have the overview over the base installation, and probably you know it from photos also when you're looking from far away right now. But what's interesting now is also to see this lockdown situation and to see all
Ja.
Another way of getting along with this shit kind of situation. It's a joke, of course, but it's also it's something which we have to face right now. Now, when we come to this corner, we tend to get problems with the Wi-Fi. Do we, Sven? Or
Not yet.
huh?
Not yet.
Not yet. So we go very shortly. We go into this room, and I asked Femke to, and I do it myself already, because otherwise we don't get out anymore. Because I just want to get to one thing which is very close aligned to tech, this tour. If there are any more questions, you can always still send them later to us, and we will be back to you also. I want to walk with you to this famous corner here. This corner is kind of a remake of a famous exhibition that Malevich had in 1913, as 1914, as the first as a first step in which the abstract painting was all of a sudden completely there. There was a huge retrospective on Kazimir Malevich here at the Stedelijk in 2013. And I started to work at another museum in 2013 in the Bundeskunsthalle in Bonn. And one of my first steps was that I was able to take the retrospective from the Stedelijk Museum also to Bonn, also to the Bundeskunsthalle. And when we were in, when we opened the exhibition in 2014 in Bonn, the painting which was the most important painting in our exhibition was this one here, which is called, it's a work from Malevich in 2015, and we had it hanging all on its own at the entrance of the exhibition, more or less before the exhibition was starting. And the most important thing about this painting is for me that it's an important step on the way to abstraction. It's like a collection of different geometric forms in which you can see that geometry is not complete geometry. It's always painted. It's always, you see a lot of painted structure also inside, and you see that sometimes what seem to be like straight lines are not straight lines at all. And it's much more painterly when you come there than what you think when you see the painting from a bit further away. It's a self-portrait. When we do our best, we see a face. We can see elements of a face which come in a different kind of organization, kind of situation together. And it's also as forms, as if those flat forms are floating on a flat surface. And that's what painting is about, because when we think about the big step of thinking from painting as something with a perspective. Eigenlijk Malevich in gang heeft gezet. Hoe je het ook draait, het werk, het blijft altijd, blijf je. One thing, you know, this architecture was made in here inside by Rem Koolhaas. And there's also this platform, and I want to take you shortly on this platform, because there are always from examples of colonialism. And also when you see the Tanzende, this dancing figure also of Kirchner, it also goes back to Cameron kind of sculptures, and they were present in the Museum for Völkerkunde, in the Ethnological Museum in Dresden, where Kirchner was living and working in this period. And we see a lot of works which directly go back to things he saw in the Ethnological Museum in Dresden, and which all have to do with colonialism. And we will show examples of those ethnological objects also in the exhibition next year, together with Nolde. There's of painters. So where am I again? I just showed you a confection baker, but we have another confection baker who also probably was making reels in the art world. So we go. I think there was a question, or am I sure? Yeah, collection, which we have at the Stedelijk. We have a big artist books collection, and we see, and that's my answer to this question. We are in a some more shit kind of situation. So finding probably, and from Chagall, I turn around and we go a bit further in time. Came into a situation like this again. We have a question, I see, and I'm curious.
Yes, someone's asking what the artwork was that was mirrored in the artwork. So that's the one where you're standing in front of right now.
I'm standing in the big one.
Yeah.
It's a Karel Appel. Always when I walk through base, we get questions about Karel Appel. People are very much looking forward to hear something about Karel Appel. We go a bit further in time and we give you a short overview maybe of how base is organized.
Kijk eens even naar de persoon tegenover je. Kijk eens naar de persoon tegenover je. Dezelfde kleding staat. Ben je veteraan? Blijkbaar, ja.
Kan er hier wat bij?
Ja hoor, geen probleem.
Staan.
Daar zijn natuurlijk weer twee tredingsslag. Een belangrijk personage. Kijk. Ik heb hier wel hier gestaan. Okay.
Ja, ik sta bij Gude.
Er is nog één treintje over. Hier. Ja, kijk. You want to sit here? Suzanne, kom eens naar voren. Suzanne. Even kijken hoor. Frank, als jij nou eens hier komt. Kom eens even hier. Ook even op haar sorteren, dus de blonde mensen een beetje bij elkaar zetten.
Alle Arische en niet-Arische akkoorden.
Zo. Dames en heren, dames en heren, dames en heren. Het beeld eruit zien. Ik loop dus langs iedereen en voor iedereen heb ik een speciale regel van het gedicht. Het gedicht heet Spaanse ruiters. Spaanse ruiters zijn niet op pindakaas. Obstakels op de weg naar boven. Oké, goed. Nou.
Wat is links en wat is rechts?
Dat hangt er vanaf waar je staat. Ja. Kom meteen, kom helemaal boven.
Caring about how to conserve them for eternity, or at least for a long, long time. We go down again, and I was planning to
Kijk eens even naar de persoon tegenover je. Deze persoon tegenover je. Op dezelfde treden staan.
Ben je veteraan?
Blijkbaar, ja.
Kan er hier wat bij?
Ja hoor, geen probleem.
Staan.
Daar zijn natuurlijk weer twee tredingsslag. Een belangrijk personage. Kijk.
Ik heb hier wel hier gestaan.
Ja, ik sta bij Gude.
Er is nog één treintje over. Hier. Kijk. You want to sit here? Suzanne, kom eens naar voren. Suzanne. Even kijken hoor. Frank, als jij nou eens hier komt. Kom eens even hier. Ook even op haar sorteren, dus de blonde mensen een beetje bij elkaar zetten.
Alle Arische en niet-Arische akkoorden.
Kom meteen, kom helemaal boven. Kom maar. Kijk eens even naar de persoon tegenover je. Deze persoon tegenover je. Op dezelfde treden staan.
Ben je veteraan?
Blijkbaar, ja.
Kan er hier wel bij?
Ja hoor, geen probleem.
Staan. Ik ga het
Ook daar zijn natuurlijk weer twee tredingsslag. Een belangrijk personage. Kijk.
Ik heb hier wel hier gestaan.
Ja, ik sta bij Gude. Dag,
Er is nog één treintje over. Kijk.
Jullie voor die... Ik denk dat ze wel een stil zijn.
Even stoppen jongens. Ik had aflieg gezegd, dus dan moeten we stoppen. Als ik er eentje uitneem, probeer...
Dames en heren, dames en heren, dames en heren.
You have to do it for underneath. Because I was...
Yes, that's what I remember. That's right.
Don't worry about it. Something wholesome. Something. Why don't you try a nice fat
And you
juicy
remember
steak?
what you thought at
That'll
that
make you
moment?
feel better if you have something to eat.
It's really great. It's too light.
And 70s, and then for a long time was not that en vogue anymore, but a few years ago she had a bigger show at the Kunstmuseum Den Haag also, and they also acquired work in the collection. It's a work by Lee Bontekoe. Lee Bontekoe is still alive. She was born, I have to have a quick look, in 1931, and the work is without title. It's untitled. It's from 1961. And the world is like the work of Yves Klein. It's also about the void, and it's also about hidden. It's about hidden volumes. It's about hidden realities. It's about we're questioning ourselves. First of all, what materials are these? Is this sculpture? Is this painting? Is this spatial? Yes, it is spatial. But what kind of space is behind there? It's enigmatic, the work, I must say, and I think. And I always thought that, and that has always been my view on art in a way, that I always wanted to go for the enigma. And I always wanted to say we can We can understand a lot of the world. We can try and analyze everything. We can try and write reports about everything in the world. But the enigmatic quality of the artwork is something which we don't and which we should not forget, and we should respect also the kind of enigmatic quality. Now, we have a question again. Yeah, I say again the name of the artist, because the name of the artist who was very much like rediscovered the last 10 or 20 years, I would say, and became a very, very important artist. We are in a kind of lockdown situation, and we have the night kind of electricity service of the museum, also in terms of security. So what we see here now are two of the most Instagrammable works of the Stedelijk since the last years, I must say. The only thing is the electricity is not working, and this has to do with the situation. So normally the neon parts on the two works should also be working, and then the lips of the two persons get a kind of glowy aura. Aura is also a good word, by the way. Well, I thought about Yves Klein and the other artists, but also where we started with Malevich, for instance. We have two artists here, and on the left hand we have Masha Ress, and that painting is from, I think, 1965, and right here we have 1967, and right here we have Elaine Sturtevant, a female artist, who painted the same work 2 years later. And that's the practice of Elaine Sturtevant. Elaine Sturtevant, she did not copy the works of other artists. She spoke with the other artists. Normally she had a discussion with them, and then she redid a work of another artist, but she did it by hand. She did it normally not by copying it directly from a picture, but she redid it. It's about redoing an artwork, and it's about repeating an artwork. But of course the work by Sturtevant came out a bit different, slightly different from the work of Masha Ress, one of the big French artists from the Nouveau Réaliste, from, let's say, the French version of pop art. So we have basically two pop paintings next to each other. We have the light electricity, but we can't switch on the one by Ress, the one as the original, and the other one as the repeated original. On the Joseph Kosuth here from the collection. So we are in the 70s, we are at the beginning of the 80s, and we are in the period that there was no dead artist at the end.
Links of rechts bij een popwerkhuis gaan staan. Dat is de uitgangspunt. Dan kijken we hoe het beeld eruit ziet. Ik loop dus langs iedereen, en voor iedereen heb ik een speciale regel van het gedicht. Het gedicht heet Spaanse ruiters. Spaanse ruiters zijn die popkinderkaars. Obstakels op de weg naar boven.
Because the sound is still on, because that comes from the same electricity as the lighting is coming, but we don't have the image from the Ulrike Rosenbach video here.
Oké, kijk eens even naar de persoon tegenover je. De persoon tegenover je. De persoon op de tweede staat. Ben je veteraan?
Blijkbaar, ja.
Kan er hier wat bij?
Ja hoor, geen probleem.
Nog één treetje. Gewoon ook daar zijn natuurlijk op dit twee tredingsslag. Een belangrijk personage. Kijk.
Ik heb hier wel hier gestaan. Oké.
Ja, ik sta bij Gude. Dag wel.
Er is nog één treintje over. Hier. Kijk. You want to sit here? Suzanne, kom iets naar voren. Suzanne. Even kijken hoor. Frank, als jij nou eens hier komt. Ook even het haar sorteren, dus de blonde mensen een beetje bij elkaar zetten.
Alle Arische en niet-Arische.
Dames en heren, dames en heren, dames en heren.
Voor mij is kunst, ja, dat.
The nigger is necessary. Well, he's unnecessary to me, so he must be necessary to you. I'll give you your problem back. You're the nigger, baby, he isn't me.
I read about it in the paper, in the subway on my way to work. I read it, and I couldn't believe it. And I read it again. Then perhaps I just stared at it, at the newsprint spelling out his name, spelling out the story. I stared at it in the swinging lights of the subway car, and in the faces and bodies of the people, and in my own face, trapped in the darkness which roared outside. It was not to be believed, and I kept telling myself that as I walked from the subway station to the high school, And at the same time, I couldn't doubt it. I was scarred. I was scared for Sonny. He became real to me again. A great block of ice got settled in my belly and kept melting there slowly all day long while I taught my classes algebra. It was a special kind of ice. It kept melting, sending trickles of ice water all up and down my veins, but it never got less. Sometimes it hardened and seemed to expand until I felt my guts were going to come spilling out, or that I was going to choke or scream. This would always be at a moment when I was remembering some specific thing Sonny had once said or done. When he was about as old as the boys in my classes, his face had been bright and open. There was a lot of copper in it, and he had wonderfully direct brown eyes and great gentleness and privacy. I wondered what he looked like now. He had been picked up the evening before in a raid on an apartment downtown for peddling and using heroin. I couldn't believe it. But what I mean by that is that I couldn't find any room for it anywhere inside me. I had kept it outside me for a long time. I hadn't wanted to know. I had had suspicions, but I didn't name them. I kept putting them away. I told myself that Sonny was wild, but he wasn't crazy, and he always had been a good boy. He hadn't ever turned hard or evil or disrespectful the way kids can, so quick, especially in Harlem. I didn't want to believe that I'd ever see my brother going down, coming to nothing, all that light in his face gone out, but in the condition I had already seen so many others. Yet it had happened, and here I was, talking about algebra to a lot of boys who might, every one of them for all I knew, be popping off needles every time they went to the head. Maybe it did more for them than algebra could. I was sure that the first time Sonny had ever had horse, he couldn't have been much older than the boys were now. These boys now were living as we'd been living then. They were growing up in a rush, and their heads bumped abruptly against the low ceiling of their actual possibilities. They were filled with rage. All they really knew were two darknesses. The darkness of their lives, which was now closing in on them, and the darkness of the movies, which had blinded them to that other darkness, and in which they now vindictively dreamed, and once more together than they were at any other time, and more alone. When the last bell rang, the last class ended. I let out my breath. It seemed I'd been holding it in for all that time. My clothes were wet. I may have looked as though I'd been sitting in a steam bath, all dressed up, all afternoon. I sat alone in the classroom a long time. I listened to the boys outside, downstairs, shouting and cursing and laughing. Their laughter struck me for perhaps the first time. It was not the joyous laughter which, God knows why, one associates with children. It was mocking and insular, its intent to denigrate. It was disenchanted, and in this also lay the authority of their curses. Perhaps I was listening to them because I was thinking about my brother, and in them I heard my brother and myself. One boy was whistling a tune at once very complicated and very simple. It seemed to be pouring out of him as though he were a bird, and it sounded very cool and moving through all that harsh, bright air, only just holding its own through all those other sounds. I stood up and walked over to the window and looked down into the courtyard. It was the beginning of the spring, and the sap was rising in the boys. A teacher passed through them every now and again, quickly, as though he or she couldn't wait to get out of that courtyard, to get those boys out of their sight and off their minds. "What are you going to do?" he asked me. I mean, about Sonny. Look, I haven't seen Sonny for over a year. I'm not sure how I'm going to do anything. Anyway, what the hell can I do? "That's right," he said quickly. "Ain't nothing you can do. Ain't much help no old Sonny no more, I guess." It was what I was thinking, and so it seemed to me he had no right to say it. "I'm surprised at Sonny," he went on. He had a funny way of talking. He looked straight ahead as though he were talking to himself. "I thought Sonny was a smart boy. I thought he was too smart to get hung. I guess he thought so too," he said sharply. And that's how he got hung. And how about you? You're pretty goddamn smart, I bet. Then he looked directly at me, just for a minute. I ain't smart, he said. If I was smart, I'd reached for a pistol a long time ago. Look, don't tell me your sad story. If it was up to me, I'd give you one. Then I felt guilty. Guilty, probably for never having supposed that the poor bastard had a story of his own, much less a sad one. And I asked quickly, what's going to happen to him now? He didn't answer this. He was off by himself someplace. Funny thing, he said, and from his tone, we might have been discussing the quickest way to get to Brooklyn. When I saw the papers this morning, the first thing I asked myself was if I had anything to do with it. I sort of felt responsible. I began to listen more carefully. The subway station was on the corner, just before us, and I stopped. He stopped too. We were in the front of a bar, and he ducked slightly, peering in, but whoever he was looking for didn't seem to be there. The jukebox was blasting away with some black and bouncy, and I half watched the barmaid as she danced her way from the jukebox to her place behind the bar. I watched her face as she laughingly responded to something said to her, still keeping time to the music. When she smiled, one saw the little girl, one sensed the doomed, still struggling woman beneath the battered face of the semi-whore. I never give Sonny nothing, the boy said finally. But a long time ago I come to high school, and Sonny asked me how I felt. He paused. I couldn't bear to watch him. I watched the barmaid, and I listened to the music which seemed to be causing the pavement to shake. I told him it felt great. The music stopped. The barmaid paused and watched the jukebox until the music began again. It did. All this was carrying me someplace I didn't want to go. I certainly didn't want to know how it felt. It filled everything. The people, the houses, the music, the dark, quicksilver barmaid with menace. And this menace was their reality. What's going to happen to him now? I asked again. They'll send him away someplace and they'll try to cure him. He shook his head. Maybe he'll even think he's kicked the habit. Then they'll let him loose. He gestured, throwing his cigarette into the gutter. That's all. What do you mean, that's all? But I knew what he meant. I mean, that's all. He turned his head and looked at me, pulling down the corners of his mouth. Don't you know what I mean? He asked softly. How the hell would I know what you mean? I almost whispered it. I don't know why. That's right, he said to the air. How would he know what I mean? He turned toward me again, patient and calm, and yet I somehow felt him shaking as though he were going to fall apart. I felt that ice in my guts again, the dread I'd felt all afternoon. And again I watched the barmaid moving about the bar, washing glasses and singing. Listen, they'll let him out, and then it'll just start all over again. That's what I mean. You mean they'll let him out? And then he'll just start working his way back in again. You mean he'll never kick the habit? Is that what you mean? That's right, he said cheerfully. You see what I mean. Tell me, I said at last, why does he want to die? He must want to die. He's killing himself. Why does he want to die? He looked at me in surprise. He licked his lips. He don't want to die. He wants to live. Don't nobody want to die ever. Then I wanted to ask him too many things. He could not have answered, or if he had, I could have not have borne the answers. I started walking. Well, I guess it's none of my business. It's going to be rough on old Sonny, he said. We reached the subway station. This is your station, he asked. I nodded. I took one step down. Damn, he said suddenly. I looked up at him. He grinned again. Damn it if I didn't leave all my money home. You ain't got $1 on you, have you? Just for a couple of days is all. All at once something inside gave and threatened to come pouring out of me. I didn't hate him anymore. I felt that in another moment I start crying like a child. Sure, I said. Don't sweat. I looked in my wallet and didn't have $1. Only had a 5. Here, I said. That hold you? He didn't look at it. He didn't want to look at it. A terrible closed look came over his face, as though he were keeping the number of the bill a secret from him and me. "Thanks," he said, and now he was dying to see me go. "Don't worry about Sonny. I'll write him or something."
Yeah?
Yeah? 1, 2,